Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to gavel in just a few minutes late, and the reason we're going to do that is to ensure that we've got presenters here. Some people have called stuck in traffic. However, if you wish to speak before the committee, you need to fill out a form, and it needs to be turned in before the committee starts. So the delay will allow you to fill out a form if you choose. If you need one, we can get one for you. Yes, they're on the table. You can fill one out. So until we get everybody in place, and if you want to speak, fill out a form. Thank you. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I assume everyone has got a form filled out that wants it filled out. The Government Operations Committee of the First Extraordinary Session of the 113th General Assembly is called to order. Today is Thursday, August the 24th. Do we have any personal orders or announcements from committee members? Seeing none, we are ready to proceed to our calendar. I'm sorry, we need to go roll call. Thank you. Clerk, call a roll, please.
Representatives Bolso, Camper, Carr, Chisholm, Clemens, Crawford, Eldridge, Faison, Hakeem, Hemmer, Hill, Kiesling, Kumar, Lafferty, Lamberth, Littleton, Marsh, Martin, McCalman, Vice Chairman Reedy, Chairman Reagan.
Here.
Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Now, we will start our agenda here. Just a word of warning, because we are in extraordinary session, things have been cut short timing-wise. We have some amendments that are under our rules are timely filed, but under our ordinary rules would not be. But in the extraordinary session rules, if they were filed before the beginning of the committee, they are timely filed. With that said, item number 1 on our calendar is House Bill 7035, being carried by Representative Gillespie. Motion. We have a motion and a second. Representative Gillespie, you are recognized to present your bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I present to you House Bill 7035 on behalf of Speaker Sexton. What this does is it creates a student loan repayment plan for those entering the fields of psychiatry, psychology, and mental health counseling. Right now in Tennessee and across the nation, there's a gross shortage of those people, and it is my intent and my hope that this program will help make mental health more accessible to all Tennesseans. And with that, I welcome any questions.
Members, you've heard the bill presented. Leader Clemens, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I certainly recognize we have a shortage of psychiatrists, psychologists, and counselors across the state of Tennessee, especially in our public schools. But my question to you is, what are we going to do to give people access to those counselors, psychologists, and psychiatrists once we have more of them? How are they going to have access to them?
You're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Do you mean like transportation, or do you mean like a PSA? Or what, can you kind of hone in on your question there, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, so we got a lot of people in the state of Tennessee that don't have insurance coverage. And we don't have mental health parity in the state of Tennessee. And we don't have enough counselors in our schools. So what are you going to do to make sure children and adults have access to health care?
Representative Clemens, let me step in and ask for clarity here from the bill sponsor. Does your bill address in any way the availability of these people as it currently exists? Is that in your bill, sir?
No, sir, it's not. But my hope would be that by increasing the amount of those people in the professions, then automatically there are more people able to get access.
Chairman Clemens, would you like to rephrase your question to something that's in the bill?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate that we have a shortage of these health professionals across the state of Tennessee, but health professionals aren't very productive if they don't have access to clients. And too many people across the state of Tennessee don't have health insurance. So we can use state funds to encourage more people to get into these professions, which we should, and I fully support. But I'd hate for all this state money to be invested in this if we're not going to invest in access to care. So I'm really trying to get to the fiscal integrity of this legislation. I understand the health aspect of it, but if people don't have access to the care and we don't have these counselors in our schools and we're not going to invest in that, then I'm curious as to what end this we're passing this legislation.
Again, Chairman Clemens, let's confine ourselves to the bill. The bill does not address that. That would be a subject for a follow-on bill if you wish to file it. So is your question concerning the bill, sir?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just curious whether or not the sponsor is going to introduce legislation to follow up to that end.
Mr. Sponsor, you may address that if you wish.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, my work on mental health is by no means done with this bill.
Good to hear. Thank you very much.
Leader Camper, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sponsor, with respect to receiving the grant and forgiveness, would the person have to stay here a minimum number of years to serve in that capacity? And could you talk about what that is and the requirements that we're going to put in place to ensure that they don't just get the funds and then leave and go somewhere else?
You recognize sponsor?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Leader, yes, they would be required to be here for a minimum of 5 years, and the Department of Health would promulgate rules and enter into a contract with that individual. And if they were to leave early for whatever reason, there would be penalties.
A follow-up, Leader Camper?
Thank you. Maybe some type of clawback provision is your hope.
You recognized?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, that would be my hope. And I also will point out that with other residency and other types of medical professions, the longer the person is there, the more likely they are to stay. So the 5 years is, I think, a good time limit.
One more follow-up, please.
Thank you. Mr. Sponsor, did you have some idea of where you wanted these professionals to be concentrated in rural areas, or did it matter just as long as they're in these different professions?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Leader, it is my intent to help all Tennesseans with this legislation. We are short across the state, from Memphis to Mountain City, and that is my intent.
Thank you, Sponsor. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Martin, you recognized?
Thank you, sponsor. When we're talking about loan repayment here, is this for people, if someone is a young person who's just graduated and they have a mountain of debt from studying in these, is that the loan that's forgiven?
You recognize?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the way this would work is if you are currently, say, getting your MD in psychiatry from UT Health Science in Memphis, and you're in your second year, you can apply for this grant. You will not get any money until you actually complete all the required certificates, training, licensure, et cetera, residency. And then after completion and after you've entered that contract with the Department of Health, would you get those monies?
Follow-up, sir.
So if I had a loan of $100,000 and I graduated a year ago, is this program going to help me take care of those bills?
You recognize, sir?
Thank you. So the rules that would be promulgated by the Department of Health, this body obviously would have a say-so in, but it's my understanding that once you enter into that contract, whatever the loan, whatever the amount that you owe, that's in the contract, and that's what would be paid. So
Last follow-up, sir? Nope. I have next on the list Representative Hakeem.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sponsor, does this grant only apply to those persons who are, I'm going to use the term, already in the pipeline, or would a person who is getting ready to start their first year, in this area, would they be able to apply?
You recognize, sir?
thank you, Mr. Chairman. So again, you can apply at any time, but you cannot enter into that contract or receive the monies until after all the completion, all the requirements, whether it be a mental health counselor or psychiatrist or a psychologist, until all those requirements are met. So you can apply at any time, but you have to complete all the requirements that are already in statute in order to get any money.
Follow-up, sir?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just point of clarity, whether you're already in the pipeline or not, are you just getting started? At the end of the process, you would be able to secure the grant.
You recognized?
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Hemmer, you recognized?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Point of clarification, if the chairman or legal, I noticed a bunch of bills or amendments that were added in committee but are not in our amendment packet. What's the status of those?
All right. Thank you for bringing that up. I was going to make the announcement. For the members of the committee, an amendment was put on in education last evening. It has not had time to make it into your system. The research analyst is emailing it to you. You should have it on your email right now. It's amendment number 009561. And to the sponsor, I made the assumption, and I was going to ask you, but since it's been brought up, your presentation included that amendment. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Representative Hemmer, does that address your question, sir?
More questions.
You're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So on the one amendment, I had a clarifying question about, says, rewrites it instead of the department, I guess administering the grant repayment programs that will be able to enter in contracts with Tennessee nonprofit corporations. What is the purpose or planning around that?
You recognize, Mr. Sponsor.
Thank you. I believe we have someone here from the department that can speak if y'all would like to hear.
Well, I don't have them on my list here. Sorry. We are in extraordinary session, so we're following the rules rigidly. Mr. Sponsor,
Um, that-
are you talking about the Department of Health? Okay, I've just been informed by my research analyst that the Department of Health is on the list. Does the sponsor wish to have them come forward to testify?
That would be if the body would like it.
All right. We are out of session. Department of Health, please come forward. Make sure your mic's turned on, identify yourself and give us your position, and then I'll have the representative repeat as a question. You can address it. Go ahead.
Holt Witt, Department of Health.
Representative Hemmer, please.
Thank you, Mr. Witt. I was just hoping to, two questions really. First is to describe the amendment and the department's planning for such. And then also if you can compare this to how I believe there's a rural physician repayment program that we have on the books as well, and how this may be similar or different than administration of that program.
So there were
You
two
recognize, sir.
Yeah, thank you. There were two changes made. The department administers a similar program, as you mentioned. We mirrored the rulemaking in that to reflect that change in the amendment. So the initial draft was slightly different, would not have allowed us to implement the program. And so the rulemaking that was addressed in the amendment changed it so that it now mirrors what's in the existing program that this committee approved last session. The nonprofit component did not come from our office, but it would allow for us to contract with a nonprofit to administer the program if we wish to.
You recognize, sir.
Is there a reason the department is not or couldn't do that if you didn't ask for that change? I mean, again, also going back to my original question, does the department administer the rural loan program?
You recognize.
We do, and we're deferred on the amendment. The sponsor chose to add that in. We're fine either way.
Follow up, sir.
Yeah. Do you have any examples of any other programs where a nonprofit's managing these state funds for loan programs?
You recognize.
Not at this time, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Additional follow up.
A question for the sponsor. Want to get it out?
All right. Do we have other questions of our committee members for our witness? Seeing none. Oh, I'm sorry. Chairman Clemens, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is the Department of Health incapable of administering these funds? Why do we need a nonprofit?
You're recognized, sir.
The department is capable of administering the program.
Would
Follow
you
up.
prefer the department to administer the program rather than a external nonprofit?
As I said, we're deferred on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Other questions of the witness? Seeing none, you're dismissed. Back in session. Thank you. We are in session, and as a reminder, the question about the amendment which is traveling with the bill. It's been emailed to you. Do we have other questions of the sponsor? Representative Hemmer, you're recognized.
Thank you. So going back to the original question, then I'm just curious why we need the nonprofit to administer this if the state is willing and able to do that.
Sponsor, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It is really, I think, about flexibility. It's allowing that to happen. It's not requiring it to happen. So I would imagine that if all goes according to plan, the Department of Health will be the administrator of it and it'll be fine. But if this program grows or they need some sort of, I don't want to use the word advertising, but some sort of promotional information, things of that nature. But it's my intent for the Department of Health to be the manager. This would just give the extra capacity for outside nonprofits if that's needed.
Follow up. Other questions of our sponsor before we go on? Seeing none, we have an amendment proposed which is on your dashboard, committee members. It's 009614 by Chairman Lafferty. We have a motion and a second. Chairman Lafferty, you are clear to present your amendment, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just very straightforward amendment here. It is a 10-year sunset for the program. As many of us know that have been around government, any at all, programs are often started, and when they are, they seldom go away. Even though times change, needs change. If it ever became necessary for us to divert these funds toward other programs, this would allow that to happen. And I believe I'll ask the sponsor if this is a friendly amendment.
Mr. Sponsor, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, it is a friendly amendment, and I agree.
Members, you have heard the amendment. Do we have questions of the amendment sponsor? The question has been called on the amendment. Without objection, we are voting on adding amendment 009614 to the bill. All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Ayes have it. Amendment 009614 is on the bill. Do we have other questions of the sponsor on the bill as amended? Question's been called. Do we have an objection to the question? Seeing none, we are voting on a recommendation, positive recommendation for House Bill 7035 as amended. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Ayes have it. Bill moves out with a positive recommendation. Thank you, Mr. Sponsor. Yes, I'm sorry, Finance. I'm sorry. Chairman Clemens, question?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just curious, in the past, and I know this is a special session, but in the past, I've heard as an excuse for not voting on bills or for voting against bills that the bills were already laid on the table in the Senate or gen sub or something like that. And it's my understanding a lot of these bills that we might hear today are gen sub. And I'm not speaking to the substance of the bills as to whether or not they're good bills. I'm just curious as to, do we know what's going on in the Senate and whether or not we're going to, are we wasting taxpayers' money up here, or are these actually going to be heard in the Senate, is my question.
I'll ask Leader Lambert to address that.
Be glad to. Chairman, thank you for asking that question. So all week, we've had very spirited and tumultuous debates on a variety of matters, and I've had other individuals ask me that very question. And there are both Republicans and Democrats that have visited with these families and hundreds of other families that ask us to come to Nashville and work for them. We don't get paid a lot, but we get paid 12 months out of the year to serve as state representatives and senators. I expect both bodies to do the work that all of you have done and our colleagues this week. The Senate has clearly indicated that they do not wish to do that work. We're going to move forward as the House. What they do is between them and every Tennessean that they serve. So my recommendation to this body, let's continue pushing good ideas forward, good legislation, and let the House be the House. The Senate has to answer to their own constituents.
Your follow-up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate that. So my follow-up question is, and I appreciate that attitude, is that same attitude going to hold over for the regular session?
We're in special session right now, and until we eventually complete that special session, that's my answer.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you very much. Any further discussion on that point before we move on? If not, we will move on our calendar. We're on item number 2, House Bill 7007 by Leader Lamberth. We have a motion and a second. Leader Lamberth, you are recognized, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, this bill is simple and straightforward, but as simple as it is also extraordinarily heart-wrenching. This bill says that if a child is murdered, their autopsy results are not public record. If the child had lived, and many children do from some of these horrendous, violent acts that are committed against them, their medical records are private. They're none of anybody else's business. Just because that child is killed should never violate their ability to have those records remain private. Mr. Chairman, before we go any further, there are folks that would like to address the body on that. May we hear some testimony on this before we take up any amendments or have any votes on this bill?
The sponsor's request is appropriate. Therefore, we will go out of session. I have 2 comment sheets here, and a department has also been put on the list. Speaking in support I have Mary Joyce. Would you come forward, please? Speaking in opposition, I have Deborah Fisher. Please come forward and take the other table. Please check your microphone and make sure you have the red light on. Give us your name. If you represent somebody in particular, give us who you represent. And you have 2 minutes for your comments. You're recognized.
Thank you, Leader Lamberth, Chairman Reagan, and members. My name is Mary Joyce. I'm speaking on behalf of myself and my friends, fellow Covenant parents, Aaron Kenny and Jada Scruggs. I have been a Covenant parent for 5 years. My 9-year-old daughter, Monroe, lost 3 of her friends and hid from and was shot at in her classroom by an active shooter on March 27th. I am authorized to say the following on behalf of Pastor Scruggs and his wife, Jada Scruggs, my friend. What we are asking today is pretty simple. We are asking for our rights as guardians of our child, Hallie, which we were acknowledged and protected while she lived, to be acknowledged and protected in her death. We see this as legislatively consistent. If Hallie had only been wounded, then there would be no public access to the medical trauma her body sustained. Why should that be any different when her injuries resulted in death? At stake in our minds is this: who has greater claim to Hallie, the public or us, her parents? To mandate that her autopsy become a matter of public record is to say that the public now has a greater claim on our daughter, that the media has a right to the information which supersedes ours. We already carry the trauma of losing our little girl, a trauma that, if the public bears it all, does so only from a distance. We bore the responsibility of naming, raising, nurturing, loving, bearing, and now grieving Hallie. To the media, Hallie is information, a data point. To us, she is the dinner table, the soccer field, the bedroom, the pool, and the first one down the stairs on Christmas morning. She is our joy and our sorrow. We submit that because God entrusted us with her care, our claim to her is always higher, our rights always stronger, and our burden always heavier. We believe that a just society will honor such an order, reflect that order in lawmaking. Hallie was a beautiful child. I'm authorized to say the following on behalf of Aaron Kenny, also my friend. Go quick.
Mr. Chairman, when her time runs out, if I may ask a question.
I would. Thank you so much. No one questions what happens to the 6 victims the day of the Covenant shooting or how they died. There is no compelling public interest to know any details of their injuries and deaths other than the cause of death listed on their death certificates. This has nothing to do with open records, free speech, or governmental oversight. This has everything to do with re-traumatizing, re-victimizing those who had to go to the hospital and identify the broken bodies of our children, shot through with multiple holes they could not survive. I had to see the injuries with my child's body firsthand, the same body I carried in mind for 9 months. The body I held, snuggled, cleaned, took to the doctor, took to school. Anyone, absolutely anyone under current law has a right to request a victim's autopsy and publish it in full however they choose. Our children's gruesome injuries are currently able to be politicized, weaponized, or just voyeuristically detailed in uncaring, sick people in the media and elsewhere. These children need to be remembered like this. This was Friday before the shooting at the school talent show. Please do not let this memory, this beautiful image, be tainted by a violent act of gruesome, dark details.
Thank you, Ms. Joyce. Leader Lamberth, I'm going to ask you to hold your question until we've had the other prisoner, and then you may question both. Ms. Fisher, please give us your name, and I'll ask Ms. Joyce to remain seated for questions. Ms. Fisher, you give us your name and position, and make sure your mic's on and you're recognized. Your mic's not on? No, look for the red light.
Deborah Fisher.
Yeah.
Sorry. I am Executive Director of Tennessee Coalition for Open Government. This bill seeks to close information about crime victims. What it does is it closes information and evidence about crime. Autopsies are not conducted by the government for the purpose of prying into the personal information about a victim. They're required by state law when a person is killed by another person or a death is suspicious. The bill offers a very narrow path, and for some, a practically impossible path to access autopsy reports. Only a parent or a legal guardian can consent to release and presumably see it. First, this assumes that the parent is alive and didn't die, for example, when the minor died. It also assumes that the parents are even present. What about grandparents, aunts, uncles, older siblings who are raising a child, but for a parent that's disappeared or abandoned the child, but haven't gone through the legal process of getting legal guardianship? The bill will fall the most heavy on the families with the least resources. The bill assumes everybody has money to go to court. The bill doesn't even mention other family members, grandparents, aunts, uncles, people who love that child. Let's say that the parent was present and did consent and that they want the autopsy release. The bill makes such release by the medical examiner optional by the use of the word may instead of shall. In other words, against the parent's wishes, the medical examiner can still withhold the report. The bill has been amended to apply to all homicides, not just crime, but not all homicides go to a public trial. For example, a 17-year-old dies after an interaction with police. It's a homicide, but perhaps in the end, the district attorney determines it was a justifiable homicide. It doesn't come out in a public trial, or it's at the death of someone's hands in self-defense. Autopsies have been used in the past by family members who are not parents, independent investigators, the press, and justice groups to get to the truth and even show mistakes. In Memphis, longtime journalist Mark Paraskia used an autopsy to reveal that the Memphis Police Department SWAT team shot a 7-year-old through the head during a botched raid at a public housing complex. The police had tried to cover that up.
Ms. Fisher, would you please finish your comments?
I ask that you wait 4 months and we get until the regular session, we get more people to the table and you understand better the unintended consequences of this bill. I understand that you want to reduce the anguish of the covenant parents, but this is not urgent and it won't undo the release of the autopsies in their case. And I think it should wait for more study.
Thank you, Ms. Fisher. Leader Lamberth, you were first on the list. You're recognized.
It's probably best I pass.
All right. Representative Bolso, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Ms. Fisher, for being here this morning. My question for you is simply this. The proposed legislation obviously includes a judicial bypass, meaning that if for some public reason there were good cause for the release of an autopsy, a judge could order that release. Why is that not sufficient to address the concerns that you have so articulately made this morning?
You recognize Ms. Fisher.
Thank you. I think that, for one, it assumes that people have the wherewithal, the money, and even the understanding to go to court. Maybe you're thinking about the press, that the press would go to court and argue for good cause. But there are a lot of situations where people just do not have that access. And so I think that that's one concern that I have with the bill. There are others, but that is one.
Follow up, sir.
No, Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Other questions of our witnesses? Chairman Clement, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And we haven't introduced the amendments yet this morning. I don't know if you've seen the amendments. I've been told there are amendments on this piece of legislation, but are any of your concerns addressed by the amendments?
You're recognized.
I know that one amendment was put on in public service sub that I think has traveled with the bill that was asked for by the Department of Health. That was the one that broadened it to homicides instead of crime victims. That actually increased my concerns. And then it also included that a reason that the autopsy could, one good cause. The only definition about good cause in the bill says that it's to it's an investigation into overturn wrongful conviction. And that increased my concern, not because I don't want that to happen if that happens, but because I thought that if it went to trial, that the autopsy would be open both at the trial and after the trial. And so my question would be, and I don't know legal, I mean, I'm not asking legal, but I thought, well, does that mean that it assumes that the autopsy is closed after the trial or that the judge seals the record? So these are just questions I have. I don't know the answer. So in terms of that amendment, those are the questions when that got put on that I thought they were done for a good purpose by the Department of Health, but I didn't understand. I thought it could actually hurt the situation more for people who want to see the autopsy.
Follow up, Chairman Clemens.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is obviously an incredibly difficult issue, and certainly the desire for this legislation is important, and we're all sensitive to that. But I'm curious as to whether or not you feel like this legislation is going to prevent or suppress data on which government entities may rely to address issues
You recognize
such
Ms.
as
Fisher?
gun
I'm sorry.
violence.
You recognize Ms. Fisher?
I think that the purpose of the autopsy is to make that information available. I mean to get to that information that you're talking about why people died. And I do think it will make it more difficult for policymakers, such as lawmakers and others, to know about child deaths and minors' deaths. And I think that is important to know how children are being killed. And they might be able to know after it goes through a trial if the evidence comes open and if some of that evidence is still available after, which I think it would be. But I think it will make it, but I don't know about the bill, though. It seems to indicate it might be closed. So anyway, I do think it'll make it difficult to make good policy decisions to protect people, to make children safer. And isn't that what, and to make children safer?
Follow up.
Sorry.
If not, Representative Hemmer, you recognized?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Question for Ms. Joyce. To you and the groups you're speaking on behalf of, or the families, victims you're speaking on behalf of, do you feel a sense of urgency for this bill, this legislation?
You're recognized.
I do. Currently, the 3 autopsies of the 9-year-olds that were killed at Covenant, murdered at Covenant by a high-capacity rifle, we can all fill in the blanks of how they died, is currently with the media and will be released if this bill is not passed.
Follow up, sir. Other questions? You recognize, sir. McCallum? Representative McCallum, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Joyce, I would just like to say, as a father of 3, I want to thank you for being here. It takes strength. I know you presented in State Gov yesterday, And it was tough. I know. So I want to say thank you for the strength for being here. And I will be voting in support of this bill. Thank you, Chair.
Do we have other questions of our witnesses? Seeing none, thank you for being here. Thank you for testifying. The chair, before I dismiss you, the chair has some questions for Ms. Fisher. Ms. Fisher, to your knowledge, has, in the state history of Tennessee, has any similar restriction been put on autopsies in the past?
The only restriction on autopsies, no, autopsies have been public record forever. And there was a change in the autopsy law more than 10 years ago, maybe 15 years ago, that made images confidential in an autopsy. And also, the other thing that this legislature did maybe 4 or 5 years ago was made the identity of the name and of minor victims confidential. So that would be also redacted on an autopsy.
Thank you for that point of clarity. Did that open up any other questions from my colleagues? If not, thank you both for being here. We appreciate your time, your efforts, and you're dismissed. We're back in session. Leader Lambert, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. Thank you. And again, these families have asked many, many things this week. There are many bills that they have supported. There are many things they've asked of this body. This one's easy. I mean, for goodness sakes, it's their babies they're asking us to protect before stuff like this happens. And yes, even after. And I respect Ms. Fisher. We've worked together on a lot of bills. We simply could not disagree more strongly on this one. There is no societal benefit from somebody out of morbid curiosity to go through the medical records of these babies. I talk to Miss Keeney every day and have for quite some time. Her baby boy, William, was leading his classmates to safety when a fire alarm went off and an evil person in his school, the safest place he ought to be, shot him dead full of bullet holes. And people want to paw through that? There's no mystery as to what happened to him. There's police reports. There's news reports. You can't go anywhere without reading exactly what happened to her son. She didn't need to get notified in any of these other families every single time somebody asks to look at the autopsy results of these children. That's what these families go through. They get notified every single time. And you know what they can do about it? Nothing, unless we pass this bill. This is an easy one. This is not political. This is not partisan. We can fight about tons of different stuff. Let's do this.
Representative Hakeem, you recognized?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Question on the bill.
The chair will not recognize that because we have an amendment to put on it.
Okay.
Questions of the sponsor. That said, the chair will pass the gavel to the vice chair. Vice Chair Reedy. Sorry. Oh, point of order? The chair didn't recognize it. Would you like a parliamentary inquiry? Just let him withdraw the thing and end it. Okay. All right. Representative Hakeem, would you like to withdraw?
Yes, sir.
Okay, that solves the problem. Thank you. Chairman Reedy, you recognized?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members, on the calendar, there is a House Amendment number 2 by Chairman Reagan. The tracking number is 9538. May I get a motion and a second to hear the amendment? We've got a motion and a second. Chairman Reagan, you are recognized on amendment number 2, tracking number 9538, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This amendment makes some changes in the interest of compromise to kind of keep public records open, but also recognize some of the problems that have been brought forward. This amendment basically says that the reports of county medical examiners on autopsies of a minor victims where the manner of death is deemed to be homicide are not public records, provided that on the date on which the minor victim would have reached the age of majority, the reports are deemed public documents, which is the situation now. Anytime a person over the age of 18, that is to say in majority, is autopsied, that report is public record. Additionally, this amendment also allows The autopsy report for the minor's parent legal guardian is not a suspect in the minor's death or in the legal guardians to consent to release, and for court orders, which was already in the bill. Basically, this amendment allows for redacting all personally identifying information, including but not limited to name, date of birth, home, work address, social security number, and other information that could identify the victim if the release is made by a state or local federal law enforcement agency or for the purposes of research germane to the manner of death. In short, what this does is allow for academic research to take place without revealing the names of the victims or any identifying information. With that explanation, Mr. Chair, and with the consent of the sponsor, I'm going to withdraw this amendment with the proviso that if the Senate should take this up, I will reintroduce it. So I move to withdraw, sir.
Amendment withdrawn. Chairman Reagan, the meeting is yours, sir.
Thank you, Mr. You recognized Representative Lambert for closing comments. Oh, I'm sorry, we have a question.
I was
Representative
just
Hakeem.
gonna call for the question again.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, my only comment was thank you for withdrawing the amendment. Thank you, sir.
The question has been called. Do you wish to make closing comments? Do we have objections to the question? Seeing none. We're voting on sending House Bill 7007 to calendar and rules. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Ayes have it. Bill passes out to calendar and rules. Next on our agenda is House Bill 7038 by Representative Gant, and I believe that's being carried by Representative Bolso. We have a motion and a second. Representative Bolso, you're recognized to begin your presentation, sir.
Thank you.
But just a second, before you get there, I believe you're carrying a bill with amendments that are attached already to it. Is that correct, sir?
I believe it is, Mr.
And
Chairman.
your
Yes.
presentation will include those?
Yes.
All right, you're recognized, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Gant had to leave urgently, and I'm going to read the presentation he would have given had he been here. First, what this bill does is provide, quote, "The Department of Education shall establish and administer a school safety alert grant program. The purpose of the program is to provide grants to LEAs and public charter schools to establish school safety alert systems in public schools. The alert systems funded through this grant program must be approved by the Department of Education in consultation with the Department of Safety." And that last sentence is the amendment to which the chairman was referring. This proposed legislation establishes that a first alert system can be included as an approved expenditure. It removes the requirement that a first alert system must be in the district-wide school safety plan in order to qualify for the grant money of $200 million for public schools and $7 million for private. It also includes the $20 million federal match. The bill also requires that the grant award be limited to $50,000 per eligible school in a fiscal year. The Department of Education is required to prepare a report to the General Assembly on or before January 1, 2025, and each subsequent year regarding the funds received and the payments made by the fund. And that, Mr. Chairman, is a summary of the bill, and we urge its passage.
Members of the committee, you've heard a presentation. I have Representative Hemmer as a questioner. You're recognized, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate Representative filling in. You may or may not know the answer to my question, but I'll give it a try. But
Is it better than even chance that I won't?
okay, can you maybe describe exactly what a school safety alerts grant is for? What is this, a text program? Is this alarms, locking mechanisms within the buildings? Just any kind of things you can describe it.
You're recognized, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This legislation builds on the school safety package that we passed during the regular session, which included this thing called Alyssa's Law that came to us from Parkland. And the alert system is a silent panic alert system that would provide for direct dispatch of law enforcement to a school in the event of an active shooter. So the alert system itself, in terms of the hardware, includes a badge that a faculty member, a teacher, a staff member would wear around his or her neck, and in the event of an active shooter, actually press the system, which would provide the silent panic alarm and dispatch law enforcement, as well as providing other details regarding the school, its layout, where the alert was actually coming from, and other data that's included and embedded in the system.
Follow up, sir.
Thank you. That's very helpful. I just know from my own dealings with my school system, and even, having kids in metro schools and that got locked down the day of Covenant shooting. I learned a lot about our safety processes, our Department of Education, but also legislators on this committee and and additionally the ones we serve with to have some, hard talks with your school systems about that. I think one of the lessons we learned from Covenant is, you see how, the certain administrators or things don't get to put forth their alert system, then it could create some additional chaos. I know, like I said, my own school system, there was a lot of miscommunication that happened. And I know that's some of the things we at our school system looked into, and it created some fixes for those processes. So appreciate your bill, appreciate your explanation.
Mr.
We have further, you recognize, sir, for follow-up?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And building on what Representative Hemmer is saying, not only is order important, and not only does this provide easy notification to emergency services, speed is also critical, as it was on March 27. Members, you'll recall that in 2018, we had the shooting at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida. And in the first 99 seconds, that killer actually shot 21 people. At Uvalde, at Robb Elementary in 2022, the shooter in that case, within the first 3 minutes, got off 100 different bullets aimed at students and teachers. And so systems that provide speed in getting law enforcement to the school is essential, and this bill allows that to occur.
Do we have other questions of our sponsor? The question has been called. Do we have objection to the question? Seeing none, we are voting on sending House Bill 7038 to Finance. All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Bill moves out to Finance. Thank you, Mr. Sponsor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee.
Members, a reminder that the Joint Government Operations Committee, which was scheduled to meet this previous Monday and then rescheduled to meet next Monday, is now rescheduled to meet next September. You will receive notices in the mail, but stand by for changes on that. Everything is fluid right now. As it stands at the latest juncture, we will be meeting in September at what would have been the normally scheduled time for the Joint Government Operations Committee. Again, as a reminder in preparation for that, though, members, you should have been contacted by members of the executive agencies that were presenting before us for their rules. If you have not been, the chair would like to know. If you have been and you have further questions or you need refreshers, please let me know. I'll ensure that the agencies get back in touch with you. Do we have any other business to come before our committee? Seeing none, the chair will entertain a motion to adjourn. Non-debatable, we're adjourned.